Okay, this episode, I'm going to be talking about the secret that I've discovered to releasing fears of rejection and abandonment. And before we get into this, I have to let you know that this episode is a very special episode because this is episode 52, which means I've recorded an episode every week for the last 52 weeks. So this is my 1-year anniversary of the Coaching Circle podcast. Oh my God. And really, this podcast has come about because I've done a lot of work on myself around releasing my own fears around abandonment and rejection. Because when you do something like a podcast, and by the way, this episode is following on a bit from last week's episode around the link between relationships and money. But committing to sharing ideas like this publicly can be a very vulnerable place. And if you've listened, you know, I share a lot of personal experiences because I never want people to think that I'm coming from this place of like, I've just always had it all worked out, because I very much haven't. I'm coming from the place of I've been in those places where things are hard and things aren't going how I want them to in a lot of areas. And it all stems from my childhood and how I grew up and the things that I learned along the way. But it can be very vulnerable, the stuff that I learned. But I share this because I want you to know that I know what it's like to be in a place where things are hard, and that you can release that stuff and you can very much change who you are and how you think and how you feel, and then create what it is that you want to create. So I always share, and you know, even when I'm in the training room, as much as I share this stuff, people often say to me, like when I share something, they say, "Oh my God, Toni, I can't imagine that you being like that, or that being you." And I'm like, well, yes, but this is why I'm happy to share it, is because people can see the difference, right? The transformation that happens. And I want you to know that, because if I can transform, then you can transform, right? It's very much why I started coaching. It's why I started teaching, because I think the more people who have these skills and help people, and that we make coaching and well-being and alternative therapies and practices mainstream, right? The more that we do this, the more people get these skills and they're helping more people, and it becomes more mainstream, the better world we'll live in. The amount of drama and rubbish that goes on in the world that would not exist if everybody could resolve and heal all their stuff from childhood is incredible. And I think if you ever think that you want to get out of the mainstream, right, that you want to get out of the norm, this is the path, right? Like working on yourself. What's inside is outside. So anywho, it's a very special episode. So if you've been listening in, if you've listened into every one of my episodes, big love to you, my friend, because you know, the episodes or the podcast has continued to grow. And thanks to you, and to you sharing as well, because I know a lot of people, they message me and say, I loved your podcast, or they're sharing it with their teams, sharing it with other people that they know, their friends. And that is just magnificent, because the more that we can get this message out there, the better off everyone will be. So thank you for being here and supporting me. And of course, all my amazing guests that I've had. And let's get back to this episode, the topic of this episode. Okay, so as I said, the podcast only come about because I've done a lot of work on releasing my own fears of abandonment and rejection. It follows on from what I was talking about in last week's episode around the links between relationships and money. And like I said, I've had lots of my own challenges. I had a lot of fears of rejection, a lot of fears of abandonment. You know, if you were born in like the 70s, and if you're a Gen X, and you grew up through the 70s and 80s, you will probably be familiar with the sort of neglect that children experienced through that time. Certainly my brother and I were latchkey kids. So from when we were very little, like when I was under 7 and my brother would have been under 10, we were coming home from school by ourselves, and my brother had a key on a strip of leather around his neck. That's latchkey kids, right? Kids used to come home by themselves after school, let themselves into the house, and look after themselves. And we used to eat, at the time, we used to just be eating peanut butter out of the jar, drinking strawberry quick like nothing else, and eating Milo out of the tin as well. But anywho, there was a lot of neglect. We had well-meaning parents. My parents weren't necessarily mean, but they had, one of my step-parents, that's probably debatable, she was a bit mean, but my parents had their own issues from whatever, and it was different times. Let's say that, it was different times. And divorce became a thing during those times, right? Women had a lot more freedom. So there was a lot more divorce because it was possible for a woman to not be with a husband and get loans and, be employed and vote and, do all of these kinds of human things that we take for granted now. So there was lots of divorce that happened. My parents divorced when I was quite young, so I was about 2 when my parents divorced, and they both been remarried and divorced 3 or 4 times each. There was a lot of moving around. I think I've now lived in like over 20 different houses, so I had a lot of fears. There was a lot of stuff that happened in like relationships for me. I left school. I didn't finish school. I left school when I was 15. I started year 11. I'd finished year 11, sorry. I started working full time. So I'd started school early and I finished school early. I also had like terrible fear of public speaking, had low self-worth, always felt like not good enough. I loved dating bad boys. There was a lot of stuff that went on. And at the root of a lot of this stuff for me was terrible fears of rejection and fears of abandonment. And very much I learned how to release these fears and work through them. And but it's work that goes in layers, because every layer that you get to, and whether you get yourself in front of a bigger audience, you up your prices, you start a podcast, whatever the things are that you might do, the next layer of thing, on the next level of thing, you may discover a new level of fears of abandonment or rejection that you never knew were there before. Okay, and so this was definitely something that I worked through. There were like layers and layers and layers that I would continually work through. And my learning and growth has never stopped. I'm forever working on myself, and that's how I grow my business. That's how I improve my relationships, how I, improve my parenting skills, all those kinds of things. But there's something that I came across that was a complete game changer when it come to releasing fears of abandonment and rejection. And this is really important. And it's something, like I said, I done a lot of work on this for myself, but also most of my clients at some level have got some limitations around fears of rejection and abandonment, especially like women that are in business. So I'm going to go into that today.
Hey there, fabulous listeners of the Coaching Circle. It's Toni Everard, your go-to NLP Master Trainer and Business Mindset Coach. Elevate yourself to new heights by joining the Coaching Circle Insiders, a premium subscription membership tailored for coaches and wellbeing practitioners at an incredibly affordable price. Inside, gain exclusive access to a supportive community, valuable resources, and expert guidance on mastering your coaching, communication, and business mindset skills. Let's get close and personal with weekly training and live Q&A to get all your questions answered. Sign up now by clicking the link in the show notes, and I'll see you on the inside.
So the important thing to know, right, there's a difference between when we're doing deep work, there's a difference between negative emotions and limiting beliefs. Okay, so negative emotions are generally things like, anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, shame, rage, frustration, jealousy, all of those kinds of things, right, are negative emotions. Limiting beliefs, or which stem from limiting decisions, are when we decide something means something. Okay, so for example, fear of rejection or fear of abandonment is more of a decision that rejection or abandonment means fear. Okay, that we think that if I'm rejected or if I'm abandoned, I will feel fear, or I will feel something that is going to be highly uncomfortable for me, and I don't want to experience that. And in fact, I'm so scared of feeling feeling those sensations of if I'm abandoned or rejected, that I'm going to try and avoid it at all costs. Okay, that is a belief. Okay, so this is the thing that I want you to know. Like when we talk about getting rid of fears of abandonment or rejection, it's not about creating a life where you're never abandoned or rejected. Okay, because that's just not possible unless you want to live under a rock, or in some like magic isolation bubble of rainbows and unicorns. In life, you're going to have people leave or reject you. Right? Because why? Because it's their right. Like you don't have to be the thing that everybody wants, right? And in fact, often if someone abandons you or rejects you, they're doing you a favor, right? They're doing you a favor. So it's impossible just to be, because it's like you don't like every single person or every single thing or every single offer that you've ever come across, right? So, and it's not because you're like, oh, that person or that offer is the worst thing I've ever seen necessarily. It's just like, no, that's not for me, right? It's the same for you. Like you're not going to be someone who absolutely everybody just has to have in their life or wants to have in their life for whatever reasons. Whatever those reasons are, they're not even your business, right? What is your business is that you can live a life where you accept the fact that sometimes people will abandon you or reject you and you won't die, right? Essentially, because that's what your mind thinks. Your mind thinks that if someone abandons me or rejects me, I'm going to feel in a certain way that it's going to be so terrible that I don't know if I'll be able to survive it. Well, the fact is you will be able to survive it. And so this is the thing about releasing these fears, is you're actually getting rid of the fear of how you think you'll feel if you did actually get abandoned or rejected. Okay, that's what you're wanting to get rid of when we're talking about releasing the fear of abandonment and rejection. It's not getting rid of it out of your life. It's getting rid of the fear. It's getting rid of the fear of how you'll feel in that situation and whether you'll be able to deal with that feeling or not. And so here's the thing that will release you from that. You have to let yourself feel abandoned or rejected. Right? Let yourself feel abandoned or rejected. Someone wants to abandon you, if someone wants to reject you, let them. Let them do it. Why do we want to let them do it? Well, number one, you will then be released of the fear of it. Okay? And it will be a non-event. And the fact is, if you don't have any attachment to whether you are ever abandoned or rejected, if you don't have any attachment to that, you won't even notice it in your life. It won't even be a thing in your life. Okay? Know that if that does happen to you, you may feel some negative emotion. You may feel some negative emotion, right? But negative emotion, like emotion in your body, all it is energy in motion. And the important thing is here, that it's in motion. So what does something do in motion? Well, it keeps moving, right? And when it's emotion, it keeps moving until it's out of you, right? The only way it doesn't move until it's out of you is if you try to stop it from moving, and then it gets stuck in you. Okay, so when you have energy in motion, when you have emotion, you acknowledge it, you feel it, you pay attention to that sensation in your body. And as you do that, it dissipates, it goes out, it moves away from you. Okay, and so when you let yourself feel that, you'll learn that you can feel that and you still survive. You learn that someone leaves you and they actually make room for someone much more suited to you to come in. Right? So we can kind of say, like, goodbye to bad rubbish in a way. If someone wants to leave you, then good. Because here's the thing, right? The truth is that you'll never be abandoned or rejected by love. Okay, love doesn't abandon or reject you. Love is always present for you. Okay, if it's leaving you, if it's abandoning you, it's something other than love. It's something other than love, and it's something that you don't need. Right? What it's doing is it's providing space for more love to be in your life. That's what it's doing. Okay. So once you have this sense that it's okay if someone decides they don't want to be with you anymore, it's okay if someone decides they don't want to be friends with you, it's okay if someone decides they don't want to be your client, right? It's okay if someone doesn't reach out to you. It's okay if someone doesn't contact you anymore. It's okay if someone says that they don't like something that you post on social media. It's okay if someone writes you a really nasty message or DMs you. I can tell you, I've had the people that have DM'd me stuff about what they think about my content from time to time would make your hair curl. Honestly, I just go, oh, thank you, that's really interesting. Luckily, you're only one out of thousands of people who tell me the complete opposite. So I'm not going to worry about that anymore, but, good for you, right? It doesn't control you anymore. It doesn't control you, okay? Because this is the thing. Whenever you have a big amount of energy trying to avoid something, so if you've got a big amount of energy, like a big amount of fear around how you'll feel if you're abandoned or rejected, right? You have to then be keeping that reality in your life. Okay, once you're no longer attached to it, once you're no longer attached, as in you don't mind if it's there or if it's not, you don't mind if someone abandons you or rejects you, right? Because there's always going to be plenty of people who are going to love you and are going to include you and are going to want you in your life, right? Like once you know that there's always this balance and that that's okay, then it no longer controls you, right? No longer controls you. And this is the thing. I did this exercise with a client just recently, and they were saying about there was some kind of issue with some of their friends, and she was worried that this person, someone had accused, like an ex-friend had accused her of something that she hadn't done, and the concern was, well, she tells other people that that's what I'm like, and then they don't want to be friends with me anymore. And I said, okay, well, then what happens? And she said, well, then, they hear that I've done this and then they don't like me. Okay, then what happens? They don't invite me to stuff anymore. Okay, and then what happens? Well, then we're not friends anymore. Okay, and then what happens? She was like, I'll get new friends. Exactly. Okay. People want to abandon you. People want to reject you. People want to, change how you think you are relating to them. Let them. It's no longer controls you. Okay, it no longer controls you. Goodbye. On your way. Thank you for clearing space for me to have more of what I do want. Okay, so my question for you this week is, what would you do if you no longer had a fear of abandonment or rejection holding you back? How would you show up? What is it that you would bring forth into the world? Who would you reach out to? What would you share? Would you start a podcast? Would you start posting more on social media? Would you start a coaching business? Would you ask for what you really want in life? Who would you be? Because once you have this freedom and it no longer controls you, there's no holding you back. It's all yours, my friend. go forth and live your best life.